And one of the things that you write about people who are interested in learning self-defense is how many misconceptions people have about what would be a danger to them, who's dangerous, who the predators are going to be, why they're learning self-defense in the first place. And one of those things is the stranger violence aspect. I think a lot of people, and I totally relate to this. I mean, I think that there's something natural about fearing someone's going to, break into your house and attack you. A stranger's going to attack you in a dark alley.
Mhm.
Um, especially if you're a woman. But why should people be actually learning self-defense, learning how to defend themselves? What is sort of a more common predator, let's say?
Yeah, so when I was looking at the data, so you have all kinds of myths about martial arts, and then you have a lot of myths as well about self-defense and violent attackers. And most of what's written in the clinics that I would go to, and they're good material. I don't want to put the material down. It was all valuable and useful, but it was always geared towards the stranger in the street who's going to attack you. You're walking back to your parking lot, and here comes somebody and trying to rape you or to assault you in that way. And the data just doesn't reflect that. The vast majority of assaults, the vast majority of murders, the vast majority of rapes, almost all violent crime is committed by somebody you know. And a lot of people tend to forget that. And I didn't really see much, if anything, on the market that talked about that. And there's multiple reasons for it. I think part of it is because most people just naturally assume strangers who they need to be more worried about, because I think they think intuitively, and this can be dangerous as well, that they are already patrolling the boundaries of their life, and maybe they're not really in a way that they should be. Or they don't feel like they're that demographic. Like there's a demographic of people who hang out with people that are going to get attacked because the type of person they hang out with. But in my case, it would definitely be a stranger. And and so I wanted to make sure that I addressed that in the book, and I talked about that actually first. And I talk about threats in order of priority. And the first threat that you have to worry about are the ones that are you already have close to you, the ones that you let in your house, the ones that you let around you. How to identify them, who they are before it gets to the point where it turns violent. If we talk about women in general, in particular, half of all women in this country are murdered by a husband or significant other. Half. So if you take that out, that's like 50% of the murders of women in this country disappear if we just take that one piece out. That's how big it is. And in almost every one of those cases, it's preceded by long, multiple um, incidents related to stalking, almost every time. And so I want people to know about that. When we talk about kids and we talk about sexual exploitation of kids or abuse, yeah, there's a possibility. I mean, as a parent myself, I can't imagine a worse nightmare than, your kid disappears and you don't know where they are. That's horrendous. But the reality is, it's almost always somebody you know. And if we're talking about boys or girls getting molested, it's almost always somebody you know, a friend of the family, somebody that you know and talk to. So how to be aware when those kind of people are around. I use the term character disordered very intentionally in my book, because the point I want to get across is that when people repeat errors like that over and over again, it's not a mistake, it's a character flaw. And you need to create boundaries between yourself and those kind of people, and keep those people away and safely from your life. And so if someone is judicious about that and they're paying attention to that about that, this big huge chunk of, like, we'll call it the statistical odds of you being involved in some horrible event, gets cut way down, massively down, by keeping those people out of your life and paying attention to when the character disordered people are in your vicinity. And even when we talk about strangers, even in those circumstances, it's not the type of situation where they're just all of a sudden on you and they're trying to grab you and they're trying to put you in a car. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. That can happen, but the vast majority of those cases, they too approach you or whoever, and there's a relationship, a short relationship that's going to ensue where they're going to engage in dialogue and they're going to be checking out to see if you seem like a good potential victim, and they're going to be asking you questions, and they're going to begin as a character disordered person, and then they're going to turn into a violent attacker, assuming that you look like somebody who would be a good target for them. But it's very rarely just no conversation, no interaction, no chance, no time to see or feel what's happening, which is also super important because we have those evolutionary instincts within us, and you can feel it when it's starting to come on. And it just boom, they're on you. That's extraordinarily rare. In reality, there's usually plenty of warning signs leading up to it, and I wanted people to be aware of those warning signs, and most of all, pay attention to them. I do talk about things to look for, things that other people may not necessarily always know, so that they can pre-incident indicators, so that they can be wise to situations where they might need to pay a little more attention. But the truth is, you almost don't need much of that because everybody else has these great instincts, and you will feel it when you have a predator in your midst. And where it becomes dangerous is when people start rationalizing those thoughts away because they want to be nice, or they don't want to appear whatever racist, or they don't want to think that of people. The more you're rationalizing in your mind away what your gut is telling you in a given moment, the more concerned you should be about that particular situation.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that a lot of women do that. I think that a lot of women talk themselves out of their gut instincts. They might feel that a guy seems sketchy, or they might feel something and they might not recognize what that something is, and then talk themselves out of it because they don't want to be judgmental,
Right.
or they don't want to be mean. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about what are women recognizing? What are they sensing? What is that gut instinct, for those who have talked themselves out of trusting it?
I think that the instincts for women and the instincts for men are very often different. And so one of the things I say in my book is that, if your wife or girlfriend or loved one or daughter or somebody is expressing some concern about having her instincts going off about this particular male, and you don't necessarily notice anything wrong, you should make sure you pay attention to her, because sometimes they're different, and the signals that those kind of people will send to women may be very different from the signals that they send to men.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing is just to be able to pay attention to it. So I talk about with my daughters what I teach them, and I keep it really simple, just ABC. The first thing is awareness between you and them about communication, where they feel comfortable telling you anything and telling you about how they feel, and they're aware that they have those instincts, and they're aware that they should be paying attention to those instincts, and a certain amount of education about things, just sketchy things to be paying attention to, things when things just don't look right. And then boundaries, making sure they understand what their boundaries are and that they're really comfortable defending those boundaries, and knowing that not only is it okay to defend those boundaries, that's what you want them to do. And then when they do defend those boundaries, you will always back them up. You're going to be on their side. And then the last piece of that is just making people comfortable with conflict, because I think a lot of times both women and men, but especially in cases with women, sometimes they're not comfortable with conflict and they're trying to avoid conflict. And then that actually creates more of a problem. And that's something you can practice. That's something you can work on like any other skill. So if they're aware of what's going on around them, and you're aware of how they're feeling, and they're aware that they need to pay attention to those instincts, and they have a clear understanding of their own personal boundaries, and an understanding that those boundaries are important and that they have a right and they owe it to themselves to defend those boundaries. And then you make them comfortable enough with conflict through practice that they can engage and I not necessarily mean physical, but just verbal, being clear with no and what you're not willing to do and being assertive. Most all of these problems can be dissipated because predators are lazy. The predators in the natural kingdom and animal kingdom and human predators are lazy. They go to the easiest target. They're not going to go to the target that looks like it's going to put up a fight. They're going to move on to the next one in almost every case. In school shootings, if there's a school shooter and he's walking through the door and he checks the handle and the door's locked, yeah, he could kick down the door. Yeah, maybe he could break the window and shoot the kids in that room. But the most likely thing he's going to do is go to the next door until he finds a door that's open. And then that's the place where he's going to, attack the children. So they're lazy, and understanding they're lazy, you understand that you set these boundaries up, you maintain these boundaries, and you're comfortable engaging in that conflict with them, they're more than likely going to move on to another target.